Today on Trucks, we'll blow your mind with a step-by-step motor buildup for Project Harry Hauler. And if four-wheel drive is good, then six-wheel drive has got to be better. You won't believe what the Bigfoot Argo can do on land and all. After that, we'll show you how to pull in the reins on a Ford F-350 dually by bolting on the diesel brake upgrade kit. That's all today on Trucks.
Hello everybody, welcome to this week's show. Now in the past few weeks, we've shown you how to get horsepower out of a motor using more conventional methods like high compression, cams, carbs, and fuel injection. But to build a motor with a supercharger takes an entirely different approach. So today we're going to show you how to build an engine that's going to get its power from a blower.
And nothing has the visual impact of a root-style supercharger sitting on top of an engine. But the biggest thing about these is how much horsepower and torque you can squeeze out of them. Not to mention they've got a sound that's just cool. Now, how does 600 horsepower on pump gas with a streetable motor that'll go 100,000 miles sound to you? Impossible? Not if you take the time to build it right, and that means starting at the bottom.
This is where doing your homework and having a competent machine shop gets real important. Now we're going to build a 383 stroker, so we're going to go with Lenati's cast steel 400 crank. The biggest advantage to using a 400 crank is it's the best way to add cubic inches, which always equals more horsepower. Also, the longer crank throw produces more downward thrust, which translates into more torque. Finally, for the rods, we're going to use Lenati steel H-beams for their superior strength and lightweight.
For our machine work, we went to Mike's Speed Shop in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. Now, there's a lot of companies out there that offer stroker kits, but it's important to remember these do not bolt right in. You've got to have some machine work done to make them work right. So, I'm going to show you what we had Mike's do for us. Now, anytime you use a 400 crank, you got to have reliefs cut into the block so your rods will clear. Now, this is mandatory. It'll cost you about $175. Also, we had our crank, rods, and pistons balanced. Now they do this by finding the lightest piece and then shaving material off of the others until everything's exactly the same weight. Then finally, we had them do the final assembly so all of our specs and clearances are where they need to be.
We also had Mike's shop deck the block for us and put the piston down in the hole by about 5 thousandths so we can get the compression we're after. Now this is where things get a little bit weird. On a normally aspirated motor, the higher the compression, the more horsepower you have. On a supercharged motor, the lower the compression, the better. So for the pistons, we're going to use these Lenati dished blower pistons that'll help drop our compression ratio down. Now a stock style piston will work, but blower pistons are designed to handle the rigors of supercharging and are definitely a wise investment for this application.
With the short block taken care of, we come to the most important part of building a motor, and that's cam selection. Now we're going to go with this Lenati roller cam that's specifically designed for a blower and will give us power from about 1,500 RPM all the way to 6,000. Now on a standard small block Chevy, the cam is held in place by the flat tappet lifters. Now these ride on the lobes and that causes friction and wear. With a roller cam, friction and wear are totally eliminated. Now make sure that you use plenty of assembly lube and then be careful when you slide the cam in because you don't want to nick those cam bearings. Now, since the roller lifters don't keep the cam from moving back and forth, we're going to use this special bearing that keeps the gear from hitting the engine block. And we're going to use this button on the front to keep the cam from coming forward and hitting the timing cover.
Speaking of timing gears, now that Stace has a cam in place, we can go ahead and put them on. We're going to use this adjustable roller set. The crankshaft gear has 9 keyways so you can advance or retard your timing up to 4 degrees. However, the straight up position, which is where we're going to put ours, should give us the best performance. With the number 1 cylinder at top dead center, slide both gears and the chain on, making sure your timing marks are lined up. Then you can pop in the cam button, and you have to use a retainer plate before you can bolt down the cam gear. Keep in mind you should always test fit your timing cover before bolting it on.
While Mel finishes up the front of the engine, it's time to talk heads. Now we're going to use these Holley aluminum heads that come fully dressed with screw-in studs, guide plates, as well as springs and retainers. Now they've also got the stainless steel 202 intake valves and the 160 exhaust valves. Now this combustion chamber is 66 cc's, which will drop our compression down to where it needs to be. This is the good stuff. Now we're also using thicker Velcro head gaskets that also factor into the equation of keeping our compression down. This is why your homework is so important. Now once we have them torqued down, we'll slide in the roller lifters, followed by the push rods, and then finally the roller rockers. And this will complete the valve train. Now keep in mind, using a roller cam and roller rockers is more expensive, but the substantial increase in horsepower you get from running this combination is definitely worth it, especially on an engine like this.
The last thing we need to do to complete the long block is put on the oil pump and pan. Now we're going to go with a high pressure pump as opposed to a high volume pump because we want to be able to keep the oil pressure up without pumping the pan dry. Now since the Harry Hauler is definitely going to stand out from the crowd, we couldn't put just any old pan on it. That's where this very cool looking finned aluminum pan from Mr. Gasket comes in. And the House of Colors Raspberry Pearl, couldn't resist that.
Another thing we better not resist is taking a break because horsepower does not come cheap. We'll be back.
Later on Trucks, we'll take you for a ride on land and off. But up first, we need to finish our blown small block.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Now, if you're just joining us, we're right in the middle of building a supercharged engine. And we have the long block taken care of. Now we're going to show you what we're going to cap this thing with.
We're going to use Holley's brand new 250 Supercharger that comes as a complete kit, including the blower, intake manifold, pulleys and bracket, as well as a 3-inch Gilmer belt.
And the first thing you need to do is bolt on the intake manifold. Now it uses a standard torque sequence, starting in the center and moving out using a cross pattern. Also, it's never a good idea to reuse old engine bolts due to fatigue, so we're using these brand new ARP bolts throughout the whole buildup. Now, we've all heard of dreaded blower backfire. Well, if this blower should backfire, this pop-off valve will open and relieve the pressure. That way you don't have carburetors blowing out your hood.
Now it's time to turn our attention to the front of the motor. We're going to use pulleys from Mr. Gasket and this water pump from Wyand. Now, as you probably already know, the Supercharger is turned by the crankshaft. So with the damper and pulley in place, I can go ahead and put on this drive pulley for the blower.
Now here's a little blower 101. A root-style Supercharger has 2 rotors inside that take the air-fuel mixture, compress it, and basically ram it down the cylinders. This is why low compression is so important. Now this Teflon strip allows for much tighter tolerances than you could ever get with metal to metal. This means less leakage and more boost. With all that in mind, it's time to bolt this thing on the motor.
Now we can put on the idler pulley in the bracket so we can adjust the tension on our belt. Now it's important to remember these belts won't stretch. In fact, you could break off the front of your crankshaft or the snout of your blower if it's too tight. So make sure you have enough slack in it. Holley recommends about 1 inch or so, stone cold.
You're probably wondering what we're going to do about carburation, ignition, and fuel system. Well, we went to Holley for all of that. This Annihilator ignition system is a must-have for a supercharger because it eliminates detonation and that can destroy your engine. We've got a high-performance fuel pump that's going to feed 2 700 CFM double pumpers that are made specifically for blower applications. Now they bolt sideways on the intake and come with all the linkage and fuel lines.
To top those carbs, we're going to run a Hilborn style scoop from Wyand. And since we have to have clean air, 2 breather elements sit right down on top of the carbs and are covered with this hungry looking fin scoop.
Now since we're after that 60s gasser look with the Harry Hauler, we needed just the right valve covers to really set it off. So we went to Edelbrock, got a set of these really cool fin valve covers and breathers. Then we detailed them to match the block and the pan underneath. Now we told you about the House of Colors paint that we used on this project. If you're still using a spray can to paint your engine, well, you're selling yourself short. Now granted, it'll cost more to use a high-grade automotive paint, but you'll only have to do it once, and you won't get this kind of pop out of a spray can, unless you throw it in a fire.
One thing that's mandatory on a blown motor is a good set of full-length headers. And when it comes to a perfect street rod application, you really can't go wrong with Sanderson. These are block huggers that have an extra big 1 5/8" tube for better flow. We also had them jet hot coated so they look as good as our motor for miles to come.
Now I know this looks like something off of a drag strip, but this motor will run on pumped gas. It won't overheat while you're idling in traffic, and when you step on the gas, well, you better be holding on to something. About the only problem you might have with this is hood clearance. Man, this thing looks fast just hanging on the hoist. It's finally time to mock it into the hauler.
Hey Stace, I thought your dad said you shouldn't be driving over 55 anyway, man.
What he doesn't know won't hurt him.
You ready?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh,
all right.
Perfect fit, man. Look at that. I think we'll be able to lift the wheels off the front with this.
Boy, if we don't, I'm going to be ticked.
Up next, it's time to hit the trail with 6 wheels running.
Welcome back to Trucks. Now, if you're into hunting or fishing or heck, any kind of an outdoor sport, and you need a vehicle that'll go anywhere and do anything, you need to take a serious look at the 6-wheel drive Argo.
We got ours from Riverfront Off-Road in Burkesville, Kentucky. Now the Bigfoot comes with an 18 horsepower V-twin engine and is the perfect blend between an ATV, snowmobile, tank, and if you can believe it or not, boat.
The torque converter drive system works very similar to the sprockets on a 10-speed bicycle. At low speed, when you need more power, the front pulley is small and the rear pulley is large. You'll notice as we accelerate, the front pulley presses in, getting larger, while the rear pulley opens up, getting smaller. This gives you greater top speed. The power goes down through a gearbox to 2 separate axle shafts coming out each side. For steering, you have a hydraulic brake on each axle shaft that stops one side or the other.
Now the Argo is a true 6-wheel drive vehicle, and each wheel is hooked into an elaborate chain system that's super heavy duty to prevent breakdown. You also have plenty of cargo space to carry all your gear or a couple extra buddies.
All right, enough talk. We're going to show you what the Argo can really do. Now with a high flotation, low pressure tire, mud and swampy areas like you'd find on a duck hunt are no problem. As a matter of fact, thanks to its low ground pressure, you'd be really hard pressed to stick one of these things.
If the Argo does have a drawback, it'd be its low center of gravity. It makes high centering the Bigfoot a definite possibility. However, if you keep that fact in mind, that potential problem can be easily avoided. There is one problem you won't have with this vehicle, and that's climbing a steep incline due to that drive system we already showed you and the low gearing in the transmission.
Well, we can talk about climbing steep inclines all day long, but the thing we really like about the Argo is the fact that it floats. Now, the only thing you need to keep in mind here is that you have a payload capacity of 700 pounds in the water.
Oh, and one last thing, nothing does donuts like an Argo. This one goes for about $6 grand, and you can get them with just about any attachment you can imagine, from snow plows to convertible tops. And if 6-wheel drive just isn't enough for you, you can also get one with 8-wheel drive.
If you want more trucks, check us out online at truckstv.com.
Bring it back. Come on. Keep coming. A little bit more. That's good right there. Welcome back to the truck shop, everybody. We know a lot of you guys out there are into really big trucks. And let's face it, you can't get much bigger than the F350 dually that has a Power Stroke diesel for its motivation. One of the biggest problems you're going to have with a truck this big, though, is stopping the thing, especially if you're hauling a capacity payload.
Now, the technology for the exhaust brake has been around a while. And what they do is create back pressure by restricting the flow of the exhaust when you let off the gas. Now, that back pressure causes the engine to slow down and you don't even hit the brake pedal. That's cool, but there's always been some drawbacks. First of all, they almost always voided your warranty. Number 2, they could damage your turbo and your engine, not good. Number 3, they raised operating temperatures. And number 4, they were expensive and hard to install.
Western Diesel Systems gotten rid of all those headaches with the turbo brake. It comes with a control box, switch, and all the hookups you'll need to pull in the reins. Now, it may look simple and small, but Western Diesel says you can pick up to 30% more braking power and you can still use it with your cruise control. Here you go, man.
Thanks. First thing we need to do is mount the control box. We're going to mount it here on the floorboard between the brake and gas pedal with the cables pointing up. We'll take these screws that come with the kit and mount it to the firewall insulation. Now obviously it'll be real easy to strip these, so just snug them down firm.
While Stace is getting things set up in the cab, I can run the wiring harness through a knockout plug in the firewall. You got it, man?
Yeah, got it.
Cool. Now we need to make our connection to the turbo.
The hookups to the harness that Mel just fed to me are a piece of cake. They're all numbered, so you just plug them right in. Now I've already hooked up a ground here to the base of the accelerator pedal. Then I splice this green wire into the IVS switch.
Now the turbo plug replaces the stock plug and is hidden behind this tube, so the hookup is definitely a blind one.
The on-off switch already comes pre-wired, so all you have to do is figure out where you're going to mount it in the dash. We're going to go here to the left of the steering wheel so we have easy access to it.
Now for hooking up the brake pressure switch, I've removed this air intake tube for easier access. Next, you need to find the black wire from the pressure switch so you can splice in the blue and the brown with the supplied Scotch locks. What this is going to do is give us brake lights when the system's activated. Once you've reconnected the air inlet tube in your batteries, you're finished under the hood.
The last hookup we need to make is to a power source. Now I've already hooked into the main power wire with this fuse link that comes with the kit. Now once they're hooked up, all you need to do is make sure your wires are tucked up out of the way of your pedals and you're done.
The turbo brake doesn't mess with your stock system. It's more like adding a second set of brakes. And Western Diesel claims their system won't alter or affect your turbocharger, exhaust system, or power plant. It's also the only approved system by Ford, so it won't void your warranty either.
If you work on trucks long enough, eventually you're going to want to try some detail painting. Now for hardware like bolts, most people will take a bolt, hold it in one hand, and then spray it with the other. Now this means you not only paint the bolt, but you end up painting your hand too. Now admit it, you've done this before. Now a neat trick is to take a cardboard box, punch some holes in it, and then stick your bolts down in the holes. Now you can evenly paint the heads of the bolts without spraying the threads, and you don't have to scrape any paint off your fingernails.
And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
Now whether you're a hunter or just an off-road enthusiast, you should always be prepared for the worst. Outback Products has put together a little package called the Black Rat Recovery Bag that should get you out of just about any situation you might find yourself stuck in. The bag comes with 2 tow straps, chain, snatch block, and various straps and hardware, all wrapped up into one self-contained bag. Pull yourself or somebody else out of a sticky situation with this bag for about $260.
Stewart Warner has always been synonymous with precision gauges. So when it comes time to put some classic gauges in a classic truck, it's pretty hard to beat this Wing series with their vintage pointers and graphics. Now you can get them in white or black face, and in a 5 or a 6-piece set with the tachometer like we've got. But don't let the looks fool you. The accuracy of these gauges is still state-of-the-art Stewart Warner. You can get into a set of these for under $300.
One thing I really hate when I'm out camping is trying to sleep on uneven ground. Fortunately, I don't have that problem anymore thanks to the Sports Truck tent. As long as the bed of your truck's not trashed, all you have to do is pop it on, throw down a sleeping bag, and you're ready to grab a good night's sleep even if the creek decides to rise on you. The sports truck tent goes for about $150, and you can get one for just about any make or model truck out there. That's going to do it for this week's Truck Gear. Here's a preview of next week's show.
We'll continue the restoration of Project Harry Hauler by chopping the lid on our classic international pickup 3 inches. Believe us, you definitely won't want to miss this television first. After that, we'll show you a candy green dream from the shop of Tucci Engineering that's in a class all by itself. That's all next week on Trucks.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, we look forward to trucking with you again next week.
Stace, it's screaming something.
What's it saying?
I see many tickets for you, my son.
Many moving violations.
And lots of gas bill.
Yeah.
Trucks is an RTM production.